Boom. All right. Testing. Okay. Testing. Chat. Chat's looking good. We're looking good. All right, folks. We're back. Here we go. Now, you may have noticed that I'm a little more excitable today, right now, than I normally am. And part of that is because of this little article that I just saw today. And I've been dying to talk about this. So I'm going to talk about this. Before I talk about this, I want to talk about the three main topics, and then I want to add a whole bunch of disclaimers so people don't yell at me too much. I mean, yell away by all means, but I'm going to try to qualify things so people understand where I'm coming from. But first, let's go over the main topics I want to discuss on this stream. Number one, I want to talk about why Google's claim of using AI for 30% of coding is mostly nonsense. And I mean that in the most generous way. I mean that in fostering goodwill. What I mean is that even if what Google is saying is true, that they're using AI for 30% of their coding, I'm going to try to explain to you why that's nonsense, in the sense that it probably has no sense for you, unless you work at Google, Microsoft, Amazon, or one of the other big tech companies. And then also, I'm going to talk about why I think that number is also potentially nonsense from an actual software development perspective. Hopefully, you'll become convinced. And if not, that's cool. Argue with me in the comments, and we'll get to the bottom of it. Maybe we'll all learn something that I didn't know. Maybe we'll talk about this first. Maybe we'll talk about this last. I don't know. The second topic is how we should really be using AI for software development. That's what really got me inspired by this, because Google issued this company-wide AI coding guidance to software engineers, and I got really inspired, mostly because I have some opinions on this, given this is something that I've been working on, I don't know, the better part of a decade, maybe longer. And it doesn't mean that I'm right. I don't think in any strange universe that I have all the answers. But I have thought about this deeply. And I also am going to try to share with you openly how I really feel. And it's not a marketing campaign. Whether you use or don't use Mentor doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that I minimally share my true feelings about how I think you should use AI purely from an education perspective. As someone that teaches at various universities on this topic, I feel like I have an obligation to minimally share what I think is the right way to potentially do this, without you worrying, am I hyping this so my stock price will inflate or whatever, which unfortunately I think Sundar has outed himself a little bit. It's just a lot of hype. Okay, so I'm going to share with you how I feel like we really should be using AI. And I'm also going to share with you how I think you should absolutely not use AI for software development, like in this case. And this is part of the reason why I think that this claim here is bogus, because I have a pretty good sense of what the current state of these systems cannot do, given like this is what I've sort of dedicated my life to for maybe the last 20 years, 30 years. I'm not saying I'm the knower of all things. I'm just saying I have a pretty good sense of like what it can do. And the And you've seen prior examples where we played around with things like Gemini and we looked at cursor. And if that is the state of the world, which apparently it is, I think there's a big disconnect between this number and what you need for this. So the third point is I'm going to talk about what you should not be using AI for. So let's revisit that. 3 things. We're going to talk about why this claim of 30% is something you should just generally not even care about, and it's probably mostly bogus, or it just doesn't apply to you. Second, how I feel. These are my feelings. I could be wrong, but how I feel we should be using AI for software development. And then also how I feel you should absolutely not be using AI for software development. And we'll probably do more than just software development, because I think there's a misunderstanding on this notion of software engineers versus just engineers. I mean, look, at the heart of it, anyone that's doing engineering these days in some capacity is probably writing code. And under that purview, everyone is a software engineer. It's sort of like this idea of literacy, that if you have a professional job, I can probably guarantee that you are communicating either in spoken or written form with something or someone, even if your job is not literature or a writer for articles or an editor for the New York Times. It doesn't matter, right? Because it's communication and we're all doing it. And so you should know how to do this thing called communication, either written or spoken. I mean, it makes sense, right? Similarly, if you're doing engineering, almost all engineering uses some form of writing software. I interact with many of the engineers that are not software engineers. There are other types of engineers, and they show me the type of software that they're writing. And in fact, it's probably the non-software engineers that I worry about the most, because I feel like a lot of the software engineers know a lot of this is bogus, but it's the non-software engineers that I think may be confused because the hype train has left the station a long time ago, and many people are just trying to make sense of like what all the nonsense is. Okay, so that's the last topic, and I've got some strong views on this. I'm gonna do my best, I promise, to not be judgy. I'm gonna try to present the facts and make clear amount of differentiation between what is a fact and what is my opinion, just so you have clarity. So you know this is actually the state of the world versus this is what Goju thinks. And then you can form your own opinions. Lastly, before we get into any of that, doing our music check, excuse me, I pretty much have been married to Dream Clinic on this Inquisitor song. Without a doubt, it's my new favorite Dream Clinic song. Huge love for our Dream Clinic guy. If you haven't listened to Dream Clinic Inquisitor, I strongly recommend it if you like my kind of music. And then to visit his channel, give him a like and a sub, whatever you feel is right. A super thanks. You do you, but if you're like me and you work an incredible amount, but you want some kind of energizing techno music that is progressive, it'll have lead-ins, lead-outs. I really feel like this is not a paid ad. I just absolutely love this, right? So this is manna from heaven for me. Anyway, now to the topics. All right. We're going to first read this article, and I'm going to try my best to not make any comments in the first pass of reading it, just so we all understand what the article is saying. There are some quotes directly from Google, but a large part of this is written by Abner. I don't know what this site is, and frankly, I don't really care. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean, like, we could pick any site. This is just in the news. This was just the top of my feed. I know that Google is doing this, and it just depends on what kind of lens you want to be presented the information. This is factually happening. It's just a question of what sort of filtering process it goes through. That is the writer that we read, which in this case is Abner Lee. So thank you, Abner. I appreciate the article. Let's read it and see what it says. Google issues company-wide AI coding guidance to software engineers. They've already sort of failed, because this should be AI guidance, and it should be to probably all engineers, not just software engineers. And I say that with a lot of love and support for Google, as much as any other big tech company. I try. There are good things and bad, right? There's no perfect whatever, but I do know that Google has more than just software engineers at their company. They also have hardware engineers. They have data scientists. They have machine learning engineers. And guess what? All of these people are writing code. Surprise. Hardware engineers write code. Machine learning engineers write code. And I don't think that they generally think of themselves like as software engineers. They're hardware engineers or whatever. So we kind of failed. And part of this is Google, not our author. So I would already change some things. And we haven't even gotten past the title. All right. Zipping it. This came out yesterday, my time, June 30th. Back in April, Sundar Pichai said over 30% of code at Google is now generated by AI. Trust. Really fast way to lose trust is to just not be honest about things. We'll come back to this. The company today released guidance for all Google software engineers on how to best adopt AI for coding and their work. A source familiar with the matter tells us that Google on Monday emailed all software engineers recommendations and best practices for using AI. Okay. They emailed all software engineers these recommendations and best practices for using AI. Cool. This extensive document was created by fellow engineers and takes into account what has worked so far at Google. The expectation for everyone to use AI The expectation is for everyone to use AI to boost their productivity. The hope is that this will lead to more rapid iteration and boost development. The guidance covers using AI assistance for coding as well as understanding what the current generation can and cannot do. Yeah, this is already, I think, yeah, absolutely fair. Do not trust a tech CEO. Whatever you do, these guys, trouble. If I could give you a super like, I would. I'll find a way to do that, my friend. Google wants engineers across the company to understand how to build AI-based systems. More specifically, the goal is to have tech leaders and managers understand how to incorporate AI development in teams. I like this. Once we get past some of this hypey noise stuff, I think we're actually getting into some almost interesting stuff. That 30% stat, which increased by 5% in the last 6 months, involves AI generating code and humans reviewing it before it's accepted. That's good. I like that. That's great. Today's guidance emphasizes maintaining rigor. Yeah, rigor. Across code review, security, and maintenance. Oh, our friend rigor. Google wants employees to explore using AI outside of coding. Yes, I strongly agree with this. Today's guidance is the most formal the company has been about using AI, with existing adoption already quite notable. Pichai said earlier this month that AI usage has resulted in an estimated 10% increase in engineering velocity, or the amount of software work that's accomplished in that certain period. Sorry, in a certain period. We'll come back to this. I do think that ultimately what you want to do with machine programming systems is two fundamental things. You want to improve the rate at which software development is happening. You want to improve the quality of the software that you are building. Those two things. If you are just improving your engineering velocity by 10%, but the quality is decreasing, personally, I'm not that interested. And the reason why I'm not that interested is that I think writing high quality software, at least for the things that I care about, which tends to be in this space, is more important than speed. If you move really fast and you break stuff, as was the former mantra of Facebook, Meta, which, by the way, is no longer, as I understand it, their mantra, then you end up moving fast and breaking stuff. I think you should move as fast as you can without breaking stuff, without like openly breaking stuff. You'll still break stuff along the way. That's just the byproduct of like pushing the boundaries. And for the most part, I think that many of these tech companies, well, at least the startups, we don't have issues with breaking things. We have an issue with moving slow enough to make sure that we are producing like high quality things. Big tech might be the opposite. Big tech might be that they have the issue of they're producing high quality things, but they're not moving fast enough. So that's great. But again, if you start moving so fast that quality declines, you could just read the news on a specific, I'm not even going to say it, but let's just say if you don't have quality, it's going to hurt you. Okay. Externally, this follows Google releasing Gemini Code Assist, Gemini CLI, as well as Gemini in Android Studio in the past year. I got to be honest, I don't really mind the Gemini name, but as an aside, I kind of liked Bard, to be honest. I think Bard was actually a fantastic name, and I think it characterized, in some ways, at least for a hardcore role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons person like myself, I mean, bards were always sort of like the jovial, they'll tell you a story, they'll sing you a song, this kind of thing. And you know, you can't like really trust everything that they're saying 100%. It's sort of like, well, that's just the bard song. And it actually, I think, aligned with the way I think about language models quite a bit, frankly, is that I want to trust them, but I mean, they don't even trust themselves. And so anyway, just as an aside, I think if they change the name back to Bard, I'd probably use it more. Although I have been using Gemini quite a bit. All right, we're at the end of the article, I think. Yeah, end of the article. And the last statement is, in a statement, Google confirmed that it issued this AI guidance today. So this is a quote directly, supposedly from Google. Our engineering teams are already regularly using our AI tools for coding, fixing bugs, and much more. These recommendations and best practices developed by a group of software engineers at Google are designed to help all SWEs, software engineers, across the company get the most out of AI, artificial intelligence, in their day-to-day work. Cool. So basically, we know to some degree that this actually happened. All the details of how it happened, we're not entirely sure, although we can be pretty sure about this 30% thing, because I think that's a quote somewhere, probably from maybe this article, that Sundar Pichai is saying this. All right. Now, that's what the article says. Before I go into why none of this really should matter for you, unless, again, you work at Google, IBM, Microsoft, big tech, I want to just peruse the comment section. And there's only a few comments, but I just find the comments wildly amusing because I think they kind of hit on the fact that maybe what I'm trying to hit on. Okay, so we're going to scroll down and look at some of these comments. And we'll start with Vexorian. Vexorian is saying, and so he's got 48 upvotes. I would upvote it, but I have to create an account, and I don't want to do that. So I consider this 49. So he says, he's quoting, involves AI generating code and humans reviewing it before it's accepted. That is what is said in the article. What he says, so you mean the engineers ask the AI to generate something, the AI fails at it as it tends to do, so the engineers have to spend time fixing it. So it's basically what was always being done with Stack Overflow and the such, but now it takes more time, and Sundar credits the AI for 30% of the code. Cool. All right. A little bit snarky, but I don't know that I disagree. I think that that's very much what I think is going on. And it's a shift from using Stack Overflow to using this locally. Now, there are some benefits of it being local, which we'll talk about in a second, but that largely pertains to if you are one of these super companies. If you're not a super company, some of those benefits, I think, go away. All right. We're going to look at what our buddy Mir has to say. Ver, he's saying, for sure, LLM is like a big fun party, and there's going to be a hangover, so plan accordingly. Maybe bring a toothbrush. Yeah. That's great. I like that. I like that. Yeah. I do think like that's actually a really good, touche. Mur, I think that's well said. That's kind of the way that I think about AI when I use it for these types of things. I think that it's like one of those things that it's probably going to be slightly intoxicating. And so you better be prepared that you're going to get a little woozy from the ride. And afterwards, you may not feel super great, but while you're using it, you may have a good time, right? So it's fun, I think, and that's cool. Like, I think that if it can help you in that capacity, like to get started and stuff, that's great. I think it's just the danger of don't take the code that it's giving you, drop that into the main line, and then go home or go on vacation for 2 weeks. This story is probably not going to end that well, I guess is my view. All right. That's our first comment. Now we'll read our second comment from Kelvin. 12 up votes, 7 down votes. Notice that it's like a little bit of a split opinion here. Oh, and we'll read what Daniel just wrote. I hadn't seen this one. My take is they are doing this so AI learns to program better by forcing other engineers to use the product, just as Microsoft recently did for their workforce. Yes, it is actually very much what's going on. It also boosts their numbers so then they can claim more people are using their tool. Like when you have a workforce that Microsoft or Google have, and they're trying to show traction for their tool, when they force everyone in the company to use it, they have immediate traction and their numbers get inflated. And so then they can go to their shareholders and say, well, 100,000 people are already using our stuff. It's amazing. And then the shareholders don't ask the question, well, who are those 100,000 users? If I was in that board meeting, I would ask that question. And then Sundar would say, well, yeah, about 90% of them are just our own people. And then you'd be like, okay, so you're forcing your own people to eat your own dog food. That is cool. And those users do count. But let's not pretend that this is something that it's not. And those of us who know how to differentiate between the hype and the realness probably already know that this is mostly what Daniel's talking about, that it's mostly used to force their workforce to inflate their numbers, to improve their growth or traction for their shareholders and stuff. But just to be clear, it's also not all negative, is that there are benefits. I'm going to try to be fair, right? There are benefits of doing this. And one of the benefits is that on top of this, their workforce become essentially the beta testers for their system. And I like that quite a bit because I much prefer when Google beta tests its own stuff rather than me being the beta tester. Like I've been Google's beta tester guy for feels like 20 years. And I like that they're having their own guys be their beta testers now. That's cool. So it's good in some sense. And then what does he say? Then they can lay off, then they can lay them off, and any future hire will be at a significantly lower salary. Yeah, maybe yes, no. I don't know. My view on this is I have a slightly different take on this than I think most people. My view is there is an infinite amount of software to write in the world. Very much like there's an infinite number of stories to be told, there's an infinite number of books to be written, there's an infinite number of movies and songs to be created. However, the difference is with software systems often end up being enablers to do more advanced software systems. So, for example, if you think about language models and the boom of AI, it's largely software. Like it is data. It does rely on hardware, but the algorithms and the models and even the data that we're using, it's largely digital data. And that digital data got created because there was a software system that figured out how to store that data, either through voice recorders, Zoom, violations of privacy that are happening on this when this thing's like listening to you all the time. I mean, there's there's a bunch of ethical and unethical ways, but the point is that software is one of the key forces that is enabling more advanced software systems, which is different fundamentally than many of the other spaces. So what happens as software systems advance, more advanced software systems are created that leverage the prior systems. An example of that is like C, C++, and maybe C#. Maybe Java is a good example. So I don't know all the details, but I know some details that, and mostly I'm going to hand wave away because let's not get hung up on the details. But one can imagine a situation like this. You create the language C, and then you want to create the language C++. How do you do it? You write it in C, and then C gives you the interface to create the language C++. Then you want to create the language C# or Java. How do you do it? You write all that code in C++, and then you have a system that allows you to program in C# and in Java. Now, I know that the Microsoft folks eventually rewrote their entire .NET framework, I think, in C#, but I think the original version, I'm not totally sure about this, but I think it was written in C++. So the point is that, and there's many DSLs, domain-specific languages, that follow this. So, for example, if you're familiar with, the name is slipping my mind right now. Boy, I feel really bad. This is the language from Jonathan Reagan Kelly out of MIT, and it's a domain-specific languages he created for his dissertation. It's slipping my mind right now. Anyway, the point of this is that language that JRK created was built, as I understand it, entirely in C++. So the whole language was actually written in C++. This is what I mean about how software systems build on software systems. I think a similar thing happened with Python. I think some of the earlier versions of the language of Python were written in other lower level languages that enabled that interface to become available. So one can see that this is a pyramid, right? And it just, as you build more stuff, the top of the pyramid continues to get taller and taller. So my view of software is that there is no universe that I can imagine where we're done creating software. It doesn't exist. And also, because software lives in the virtual world, it doesn't have space constraints. It's not like physical embodiments, like it's a house where you can imagine if we eventually grow so big as a species, we're over 8 billion people now, I guess. If we grow to 80 billion people and we're all on the planet, we take up space, we take up physical space. And unless we're building up or down, we're eventually going to run out of flat space because that's a limitation in the physical world. The software world lives in the virtual world, which has no such constraints. So you can create whatever the heck you want, and it's just, yep, it's there. That's why you can continue to grow World of Warcraft, or you can be in Mentor, and Mentor can have some number of repos, and it feels like, wow, that's a lot of repos. It's full, and then we just add more, and it just keeps growing. And yeah, there are limitations with this, but many of those limitations can be like circumnavigated based on just different things that you do. There are bindings for sure to physical objects like hard drives and computing devices, but the actual embodiments of the software itself is a virtual system. And so the point is that anything that you can dream up in your head, you can start to try to build as software. And so just like our imagination is unlimited, software is also, at least in my mind, unlimited. Therefore, going back to Daniel's point about then they can lay off the software engineers and any future hires will be at a significantly lower salary. I mean, maybe, but I think the point is that I don't live in a universe where we'll ever be done writing software. I don't think that universe exists. Unless there's some sort of catastrophic event. And even then, and I'm talking about a catastrophic event that sends us back to the dark ages, even then, we're only temporarily suspended from writing software as we rebuild the infrastructure to build software again. So my take is, I think, different than, this isn't like building bridges, right? Where eventually you have all the bridges built for all the things that you need to build bridges for. And then you're like, all right, guys, we're done building bridges. There are no more bridges to build. Software's not like that. As we build more and more, we want more and more. Like, again, I go back to the interplanetary species. What are the infrastructure systems that we've built that are going to get us to Mars? We haven't even started building those systems. I mean, the only systems I can think of that might be even remotely reliable for such interplanetary travel would be things like maybe real-time Linux. Those are the only kinds of systems that I think, yeah, I might rely on this. But many of the other systems, this is just toy stuff. I'm not going to have this control the lives of thousands of people as they leave this safe environment. And then everybody's life is dependent on the redundant and 100% functioning of the life support systems and abilities for this thing to transport us from this location to this location. That's got to be as good, if not better, than airplanes. And I don't see hundreds or thousands of people visiting the moon yet or hanging out on the moon. And I think largely that's a software problem, which goes back to the point I was making earlier, which is this is not just for software engineers. It's for all engineers, in my mind. Specifically, I think the one that comes to the forefront of my mind are hardware engineers. So for those of you that don't know, almost all hardware today is built in software. That's how you build the hardware. You can do a variety of things. You could do your AutoCAD, so you're going to do whatever. But I'm talking about things like actual hardware in terms of computer engineering. These are software systems that then get created as simulation or emulation, and you do it in hardware description languages like Verilog or sysverilog or other languages that are like slipping my mind right now. But basically, they're all HDLs, hardware description languages. But those are software languages. They are programming languages. You are writing software, but you're a hardware engineer. You're not a software engineer. So it's not just software engineers that are using these things for coding. It's really all engineers. Okay. So this is the state of things. Now let's. So that's our article, and I think that some of these things are I'm a bit unsure of. I think some of these other things I agree with and I'm pretty excited about. And then I have a lot more to share on specifically what I think we should and shouldn't be doing. But before I go into that, let's start with number one. Why Google's claim of using AI for 30% of coding is mostly nonsense, or let's just say let's be more kind. This is on me. I'm going to try to be more kind and say is let's say less useful for normal devs. We'll say that. And by normal, I mean non-Google, non-Microsoft, non-VHDL. Yeah. Thank you, Ver. VHDL. That's right. That is one of the languages I was missing. That's a really good one. Another big +1 to you. Non-Google, non-Microsoft, non-Amazon. The reason why I'm removing these companies is these companies are large enough to house their own internal data center. And by having their own data center, they can run their own large language model as well as train it inside of their company. But this is mostly restricted to big tech companies. And by big tech, I'm really talking about like Fortune 100 companies. So if you're in that list, you can probably use language models potentially for 30%, although I think that this is mostly a little bit hyperbole, and I'll explain that in a second. But if you're not, the reason why this is less useful is that if you are writing code that is potentially proprietary, which is a lot of the code that's out there, it's your secret sauce, right? Like, what do the algorithms inside of Uber look like? We don't know. Is there secret stuff there? Probably. What about with Google? What about with Palo Alto security or things like that? What about with Merly, right? You can just go through the list, and almost all the software companies that are tech companies, even if they're not these trillion-dollar companies, they will have code that is IP. And if you have you have intellectual property that is code, you have IP that is code, you can't just send that out to the internet. Because if you do, that's like your trade secret. That's your stuff that's like, it's too sensitive to potentially even patent. You don't want it to patent it because patents are public domain. That's why there's a delineation between patents and trade secret. Trade secret often is above the patent stuff because it's like, no. Yeah, this is worthy of a patent. Keep in mind, like I've done a few patents in my days. So there's a couple that I've worked on, and the folks I was working with said, yo, this is actually pretty cool, but it's too trade secret. So no, we can't let you do this. This needs to stay inside. Now, if you have code that is trade secret, and many of these people do because it's code IP, you can't send that over the internet. You can't send that over the cloud. Why? Because you just sent your secret sauce, your Coca-Cola formula, to Microsoft. Like, are you really going to do that? You're not. So therefore, if Google's doing 30% of their coding with AI because they house the language models inside of Google, just like Microsoft and Amazon do, then maybe they can do 30%. Does that mean you can do 30%? Probably not. If you have any code IP, I think it's in here somewhere. I thought I had something about, yeah, here we go, right here. Absolutely not use it for this piece here. That if you have this, and like Merly has this, and many of the startups that I worked at before this, like when I was at Machine Zone had this, and Machine Zone wasn't going to be willing to. Yeah, I have a few. Yeah, Bear probably looked it up. So my point is, at the higher level, is that you, even if this number is real, and I think that this is majorly inflated, you're likely not going to be able to get this because you don't have the cloud infrastructure to house the large language model system that can be iteratively refined on premises to then use it at that scale. But Google does, and so does Microsoft, and so does Amazon. So the things that they could potentially do with AI for development is probably more advanced than what you can do, simply because they have the budget to put this internally. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, that's assuming that this number is real. Let's talk about this number for a second. So this basically is implying that only 70% of the code that Google is writing is written by humans. That's what they're sort of trying to articulate. 30% of the code is now generated by AI. First of all, I feel like I get kind of sad when big tech companies do this, because I feel like, one, they're doing a disservice to themselves, because I do think that they're burning trust. They're burning bridges, because I think most of us out there that think about this, we know that this doesn't quite make sense. Because Google is one of the companies that creates supposedly some of the most hardened, highest quality code in the world. I mean, like this operating system that is Android is really, as I understand it, a variant of Linux. And Linux is one of the most robust operating systems that exists. It's a successor or a embodiment, a deviation of Unix, back from Berkeley Systems Development, BSD stuff, or at least some variant of that. This is really advanced, hardened code that just does not break. We've seen the state of AI systems today, and without giving it any real hard work, we've seen that they produce a whole bunch of not great code. So if Google is producing some of the best code in the world, and I think that they are, I think the data shows that they are, because this thing very rarely crashes on me. Whereas I've worked with operating systems that aren't robust, like Windows ME, for example, or Mac OS before Mac OS OX, like 9 and before. You accidentally code a memory leak in those operating systems, you're going to take the whole machine down. I've literally done this multiple times. Didn't even have a protected memory model. That's actually part of the reason why Apple switched to its, as I understand it, its OpenBSD kernel, which it's based off of now. Good on Apple. Good that you did that for OS X. Largely a good move toward the right direction, which again is Linux, because I think they did a pretty good job with this. The point is that doing this kind of coding and this kind of development is hard. It's rigorous, it's slow, and the AI systems that exist today, we've seen them, they don't produce bulletproof code. They don't. They get stuff wrong all the time. And we can look at any of these systems and we can see, even with Mentor, that we can pick potentially any given anomaly, and even of the things that Mentor's doing, and it's designed to be as high quality as possible. We don't get all of this right. And so how is it possible then that the other systems that don't have nearly the focus on rigor and quality would be getting this stuff perfectly right, to where 30% of the highest quality software engineering code, whatever, from one of the world's top tech company could be relying on it in that capacity? I think it's mostly mumbo jumbo nonsense. I think that they are hyping the heck out of this, and it's not actually 30%. What I believe they're doing, this is speculation. So again, this is not fact. This is just my opinion. What I believe they're doing is very much like what he's mentioning here, is that anytime you touch an AI system, it's like AI did it. Even if the AI did it wrong and then you fix it, they're still saying AI helped. AI helped. You used the AI, so it helped. Even if you threw away all the stuff that you did with the AI, they're still counting that, mostly, again, to try to inflate the numbers, to show that this is like an amazing thing, to try to then control the market, right? It's more of like a marketing thing. And this goes back to what my good friend, well, in my head, he's my good friend. I've actually never met Linus. And I know some of you think that I like overly praise Linus. Look, I'm just trying to make the point that I like that Linus, at least in my mind, he's not perfect. I'm not perfect. I say stupid things all the time. Sometimes Linus is a little bit too over the top and he beats people down, right? I get it. Like I probably gave my own team the beat down quite a bit today. And not because I'm trying to be mean, but because, like, why are we doing this silly stuff? And so inside of my circles, I sometimes come off like this. And so I can have an appreciation for, like, cut the guy some slack. I'm not saying his messaging is perfect. We can all do better, but I'm not gonna pick on him because he makes missteps, because frankly, I make way more missteps. That being said, one of the things that I think Linus doesn't do necessarily wrong is calling out BS. I think he's really good about calling out BS in general. And he does it all through the Linux kernel, all through the Linux maintainers. He gives NVIDIA the finger because they're not helping with driver support for Linux and other things. And he's doing it here. So we have Linus Torvalds has expressed skepticism about the current state of AI, describing it as 90% marketing and 10% reality. That's how I feel. What I suspect is it's more like 90% marketing and 10% real. Here's what I think it really looks like. It probably looks like that. It's probably this number. For those of you that are on your phone, that number is 3%. And that might even be generous. It might be even less than 3%. But the point is that is the wrong metric. You shouldn't really be looking at these AI systems as coding savants. At least I think that that's a silly way to use them. And I think Linus has shared a similar view, is we can already write code. And I don't know about you, like when I'm writing emails or I write this thing here, I don't use the AI to do it. I will use the AI to help me with spell check. I try not to have spelling mistakes. I will use the AI sometimes if it does like sentence completion, but I generally am not going to use the AI to be like, write me an email that's going to do this, or write me the topics for this. Now, I realize that I probably write more than most people, and so this is a little bit easier. I'm not saying don't do that. I think that AI systems can be very useful for people that are learning English or another language to ramp up on their ability to communicate. It's also super great for translation, but keep in mind that natural language is not the same as programming language. Natural language is in the space of soft science. It's ambiguous, it's unstructured, and it's open to interpretation. Software code is not. Okay? It is not. If child item output dot count is not equal to 1, this if statement cannot execute. It cannot. That's what hard science looks like. It's not like, well, but it's 0.999, guys. Can't we just agree to like just let it slip by? No, because it's not soft science. It's not subjective. We're not like sitting around voting on this and saying like, yeah, it's like a 4.8 movie. Let's just give it a 4.9. What the heck? This is hard science. And so if this count isn't exactly 1, then it cannot do this. This is a major deviation from programming languages and natural languages. Programming languages in many spaces are trying to eliminate ambiguity as much as possible, if not entirely. That there are things that happen at runtime that make it potentially still ambiguous. By the way, my team has been working on this. Check this out. Like, I think some of you probably saw previously, if I would move this, it would like freeze out the whole system. And now it's like smooth as butter. Yeah. So big props to Valentine, our super JavaScript, TypeScript developer. This guy is unreal. So Val, you're amazing. I love it now. I can do this all. Probably I'm annoying everybody on the stream by doing this, so I'm going to stop. But point is that this is hard science, and hard science has to follow the rules. Stochastic AIs are probabilistic systems that don't necessarily have to follow the rules, and so using them for hard science may not be super great. That's why when you say that you're using it for writing code, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'd like to see the data. I would love to see the data, because right now you're saying some stuff, but we're not. Like, so Merly is a machine programming company, and we're building AI systems that can do stuff like this, and it can build solutions like this. And what I know is that while this side of it, which is all Merly's technology, is all Merly's tech, this is deterministic. And what we generally see is this is at the level of a nines problem, that almost in all cases, when Mentor flags something as a concern, it is correct, especially for the critical ones. What is not so correct is when we pull in the stochastic systems that are using language models and they try to speculate on the solution. And the solution is, so for example, this might be right, this might not be right. And I think many of you have heard me say that part of the reason why there's no commit to Git, push to Git button, is I don't have the confidence yet to put my own credibility on the line and say, this works all the time. Whereas I am happy putting my credibility on the line, saying, yeah, I think that this does pretty good. And we have almost 100 billion lines of inference. That's, I don't even know how many repositories that is. Approximately, let's say that's on the order of something like 100. That's awesome, Johan. I appreciate that a lot. To put it into context, 100 billion lines of code is probably on the order of, let's say, 100 million repositories that Mentor has run inference on. And we're working heavily with the Linux Foundation, IBM, and several other partners. I can't mention their names. And what we generally see is like, this is pretty good. This is like pretty reliable. This part is not. This is not reliable. This is not this is a 99 point whatever. This is not. I do not trust this enough to say that this is 99% right. I think what I say is it's on the order of, based on where it is today, it's probably 90% right. That you could take any one of these and say 90% of it is right, or you could take it as any one of these might be correct, any one of these four, and maybe if you do this a couple times, one will be like completely wrong. And I've seen that. I've actually seen it where you try to look at the answer and it's like, this isn't actually right. It's close, but it's like the Gemini example that we saw, where it's like, it looks correct and it sounds correct, but there's one case that's like not exactly right. And that's what we need for production quality systems. At least that's my take on it. So this is a little bit of my background on this. And I want us to be using these systems to do code, mostly because I don't think AI systems that are going to help us with code are going to put anyone out of work. It's just going to raise all boats. It's like the idea of saying that compilers made software developers jobless, or like the Python runtime environment, or like the React engine is putting people out of jobs. It's just raising all boats. People are still writing JavaScript. They're still writing Java. They're still writing C#. They're still writing C and C++ code. They're just not having to write those lower level things now. And I don't want to write those lower level things, guys. Like, I've written enough for loops and file parsers and all this other mumbo jumbo. I want to work on the hard stuff. I want the easy stuff for the AI to handle. And that's where I think we should be heading. I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think there's other things we can use AI for. But when we talk about the code, I think we should be talking about using the code that the AI systems are generating as helping us. If they are going to help us more toward this space, I would argue that their utility is more in scaffolding. It's more in bug fixing, right? Like this is super important. Scaffolding is super important because almost all systems have scaffolding code that you need to use. Right now, we use open source as one of the mechanisms to try to overcome this, right? And it does. Open source helps tremendously with that. But again, it's very much like Stack Overflow, is we have to take it and then tweak it a little bit. AI can help split the distance a little bit. And it can do things like scanning millions of lines of code like this, where we could do this, but this is a lot of work. This would take a long time, right? And so let's just have the AI do the stuff that it can do so we can work on higher order problems, like the stuff related to intentionality and stuff that, Ver, I know, loves, related to time dilation and things like trying to make sure that the intention of the code is perfectly captured by the implementation, and then having the AI help us see, like, well, what's missing. And, it's just like, it's more like using the AIs as Star Trek is than the AIs as Terminator is my vision of the future. Is the AIs are the Star Trek AIs, and they're super powerful. And you say, computer, do this thing, just do it, and then tell me when you're done. Or the way like Iron Man does it is he'll say, okay, look, I want you to speculate on this, and I'm going to explain all the parameters. I'm going to give you the intention, and then you're going to tell me I missed some stuff. We're going to argue about this. We're going to eventually get it right, and then you're going to go to work for hours on end. And then you're going to come back and say, yeah, that worked. And that's really good because it can save us huge amounts of time as it walks through all these different paths. That goes back to using AIs for prototypical generation. I think that is something they're super good at. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So I'm going to, hopefully I've compelled you on point one. I don't know for sure, but I do know that there's a lot of hype out there. And I think that I just wish they would stop doing this. AI is here for real, and it is super valuable. It's just like, I don't know, just people feel the need to just add zeros to things. And it's like, if I came to you guys and said, hey, we're using AI, and guess what? 3,000% of all of our coding is being done by the AIs now. And then you guys would say, okay, Goju, I don't know if that's possible. I'll be like, no, it's possible. It's totally possible. It's incredible. And you're like, but that's more than 100%. And then I sit and try to argue with you on why 3,000% makes sense. I think I've lost everybody. because they think you're all smart people, and you know that this is me just being disingenuous to try to inflate stuff, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It's the same point that I think Linus is having, is that it does have value. Even if the value is only 10%, that's tremendous value. That's tremendous value, because what is that 10%? 10% is like helping me fix bugs that I don't want to fix. Like, frankly, if I never have to fix any bug again for the rest of my life, I'm loving life, because I much prefer building systems and thinking really hard about complex stuff and then just seeing that realized. The bug fixing stuff where it's like, oh, login's not working. Oh, or this particular, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me quickly scan the chat here just to see. So they're saying it's the same pattern as the 3D revolution where everyone's supposed to be printing their own. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like 3D printers. This is a really interesting point. There is, I think 3D printers are also super cool, but we're not going to necessarily use a 3D printer every day, right? And when we need it and it does stuff, and as the technology evolves, like I see people are starting to do like 3D printing of houses and stuff, and I see like, yeah, if you can produce those at scale and they're cost effective and they're building high quality houses, then let's lean into that. But because it's science, it takes time. It's not this overnight Sam Altman hypey whatever AGI thing that's just like, oh, we've reached AGI and no one can even define it. No, that's not it at all. It's a gradual progression of things as we explore the space and we take missteps and realize, oh, that's wrong, but we're moving in the right direction. And then we take another step and be like, oh, that's good. This is solid ground. And that's what we do. And we're in that exploratory phase right now. So we all just need to chill a little bit. And I'm not talking about you Jeters. I'm talking about like Sundar Pichai needs to just like chill, bro. Yes, AI is cool. It's doing great stuff, but it's not 30%. And you're kind of hurting yourself, but you're creating like massive, like the first comment that I think I was seeing was, if it is doing 30%, why did Google Cloud just go down, right? I don't know if you guys experienced that like I did, but it did. Google Cloud went down. And what's interesting is that's not even a knock on Google. I think what that is that's actually praise of Google. How often am I impacted by Google Cloud going down? This is the first time it's ever happened where I've been negatively impacted by it. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me actually that Google Cloud is pretty reliable. I've also experienced the same thing with Amazon. There's only been one time in the time I've been using Amazon where Amazon was down. And that tells me that those pieces of software are highly reliable. So you guys are creating highly reliable systems, but we know these systems are not producing highly reliable code. So stop. Just stop it, okay? You're only hurting yourself, Sundar. Just drop a zero, have it grow at a reasonable rate, and people are probably going to love you a lot more. Even if your investors pause for a moment, your shareholders pause for a moment, you're likely going to actually win over the goodwill of the people and get a lot more trust. Because again, people are gullible, they're not stupid. And they've been gullible for a while, but now they're getting wise to it. And I love it because we're correcting the train. And then Johan is saying that he's appreciating the balance takes to stop the out of control AI hype. We need more voices like this. I 1,000% agree, Johan. If I'm saying that correctly, this is part of the reason why I created this channel is I have to deal with a lot of people that kind of like they in some sense they're visionaries, which I love, but they don't necessarily have. Not all of them have a strong scientific background, which is not, I'm not faulting that. I'm not faulting them for that. I'm just trying to share more of the background. So sometimes what can happen is they can kind of lose themselves, especially as other people are saying similar things. It becomes an echo chamber. And so all of them are kind of talking to each other about this thing. And then what happens is, any sphere cursor gets valued at $3 billion. Why? They created a wrapper around visual code, and then they're using models that OpenAI created. Like, look, with all due respect to the Anysphere folks, and I hear Cursor can do really cool things, that's not $3 billion of market cap. That is interesting engineering on technology that's emerging and being smart about utilizing different stuff. But honestly, guys, if I'm doing stuff like that, if I'm doing it the right way, I got to tell you, I'm not basing it off of visual code. And the reason why I'm not doing that is this is what visual code looks like. This is not the best. I mean, I'm not saying that Mentor is the knower of all things, but I've looked at some of these issues and some of them are not super great. So if you're building a system, I mean, first of all, like, we're all reasonably smart people here. This is copy pasted code. We can quickly pattern match and see that that's the case. So that's not good. But let's sort this by things that have been introduced more recently. So this is like 0 day, 1 day. I suspect actually, let's sort it by these higher priority things. We can see actually just as we scroll across. And again, I'm not trying to pick on Microsoft here. I'm just trying to make a point. Like, okay, I've made my point. For those of you that code, I feel like maybe I've made my point. For those of you that don't code, you may be wondering, yeah, you probably don't want this. And Mentor's probably going to complain about this and say, yeah, I'm going to rewrite this. Okay, look, so this is what I mean about Mentor being wrong. Mentor is not wrong, probably, on this solution. This solution is probably correct, but it's not right in it's not right in terms of it's slightly better quality because you have a degree of abstraction and indirection injected here. That's good. So now this can change behind the scenes and everybody can just call this function. Okay, it is a step in the right direction, but this still doesn't satisfy me. One, because there's probably a logical grouping on things that can be semantically teased out so they're in the same category. Like, I can scan this and see that there are things related just to the output, and those things should be grouped together. There should be an output category for things related to output. There appears to be things related just to the font. Those should also be in their own category, right? Like, there's ways to break this down so it's logical, and then you should have an explanation of exactly sort of like what it is you're trying to pull off here. So this is an example of what I mean with the AI systems and why I think that Google is likely not doing 30% of their code through the AI systems, because they'd be getting this. This is what they'd be getting. And this type of code, I'm telling you, if my team tried to commit this to the mainline for Merly, me, Urs, Tim Matson, Taylor, all of us would reject this out of pocket and say, no way. Nope. Like, you probably want an array. This should be a list of enums so it can grow magically. You just check this inside of a for loop and you group them according to their category. Make it clear. And we're not going to allow this. But this is what you get with the AI. All right, super. Okay, we're done with point 1. That only took us an hour. Let's go into point 2. Actually, let's invert this. Let's go into point 3. And then we'll go back to point 2. So point 3 is how we should not use AI for software development. This is probably a shorter list than what it should be, but I just quickly wrote this. And so if we do a follow-up or we sit here and think about it, we can make this list more refined. But here are some things that I think you should not use AI for software development. The first is code, which is what these guys are saying they're using it for. No, it doesn't make sense. Your math is not mathing, as they say, for all the reasons that I just mentioned. And even with this example, and why there is no freaking commit to GitHub on this side yet. This side is right. This code sucks. This code should be much better. But this code isn't much better than this code. It's a little bit, but I should be better. So how do you use AI? Not for that. Okay? Especially if it's this piece. If it's the production quality side, no. Strong no. Do not use it for this. If you are, you're probably doing a lot of things wrong and you shouldn't use this. That doesn't mean you can't or you shouldn't use AI or Vibers or whatever the heck we want to call them to do software development if you're using them for prototypical things, quick sketches, or like just sort of experimentation. I'm talking specifically about production quality code here. And I got to be honest, I consider something like Visual Code as production quality code because it's open source and people use Visual Code for production systems. And this terrifies me a little bit. And my hope is that, in fact, I know some people from Microsoft are watching GTT, and I would love for you Microsoft folks to look at this jump and see that this red line should not eclipse this blue line. Like, let's just make it as simple as possible. The red line should always stay below the blue line. That's all you need to know. So can you get the red line back below the blue line? Just do that. And then all the other stuff will kind of just fix itself. So as you can see, for a long time, the red line was below the blue line. And then it jumped above it. I don't like this. Let's just bring this back down. And notice, too, that I don't know what you guys did, but this was... Okay, check this out. This is in October. This is the end of October in 2024. So we'll say this is like the beginning of November. Let's say the beginning of November in 2024. I'm going to step forward 1 point. Just one inference point, and we'll see where we are. Okay, so again, we're November of 2024. Now we're January of 2025. That's 2 months, guys. In 2 months, we went from 2,400 issues. These are like the ones Mentor is pretty usually correct about. To 40, these first two numbers inverted themselves, and not in a good way. Like you would want these first two numbers to invert themselves. That would be better. But you didn't get that outcome here. And that's not good. And that happened in 2 months. So whatever it is you guys did, you should not do that. Like, I'm just trying to keep this as simple and as basic as possible. I don't know what it is that happened, but in 2 months, you are really sending things in the wrong direction. And so don't do that. Go back and look at this and then figure out what you did and then try to stop that from happening. And then that likely is going to at least put you where the red line is below the blue line. And if you look at these other systems, again, I'm not trying to pick on Microsoft here. I'm just saying, like, even systems like Debian apt, which I think is not necessarily the ideal system, because you can see the scores are pretty average. Notice how the red line is way below that blue line, right? It's just way below. And so the proportionality here, it doesn't even come close. And as you look at more and more systems, I'm just using the down arrow keys to iterate through. Like, just find the case where the red line eclipses the blue line. We'll just do this quick experiment. I actually haven't even done this. I don't know. There was actually, look, right at the beginning. Oh, yeah, I don't know. But this one, I don't know, maybe. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here's a period where it's good. It's control C. Man, there, buddy. Yes. It is massive control Z time. So here's a case. That's pretty cool. And what's interesting is this is ClickHouse. Look, ClickHouse is reaching this point. Let me show you. Let me just show you an example of this. And by the way, ClickHouse overall is pretty good. But even with where they are, if we go back, look at this. This is November of 2024. So probably here. 300 issues, and then I step forward once, they've almost doubled the issues, and then they've added another 100. So in these two steps, from November of 2024 until May of 2025, they've nearly doubled the issues. But check this out. When we go in, and by the way, I love the date thing because it tells you now how, like, you can see this. If you sort by when the issue was introduced, you can see the order. Check this out. Some of these ones that have been introduced in the last iteration, essentially since those 2 months have passed, they're the main culprits of badness. What I'm doing here is I'm scrolling over just so I can get the whole control expression. And by the way, ClickHouse, as I understand it, is actually a pretty good repository. But, yo, I mean, So this is what I think you should use AI for. I think AI is really good at finding stuff that's sort of hidden that you might not have noticed because maybe some junior engineer came in and wrote a whole bunch of stuff that somehow just didn't get code reviewed because people were like, look, it's on end of year break. I don't want to review all this. Go ahead, Jeff, check it all in. I trust you. And then Jeff checks it all in, and then you come back and you're like, wait, what? But the worst part is if you don't have the wait, what moment. You instead don't know that this is happening. And that's actually one of the reasons why we created Mentor is there's so much code. Like let's argue from the side of ClickHouse for a second. ClickHouse is nearly 2 million lines of code, and the majority of that code is phenomenal. This is really hard to do. This is really tough to do. I've written systems like Notica, for example, is several million lines of code. It's really tough once, at least in my experience, it's really tough once you get beyond maybe 100,000 lines of code to just get things so they all work together and you have so many different moving parts. You maybe have multiple developers, different people understand different things. So keeping things intact for a code base that's that large is no easy feat. And for the most part, I think ClickHouse has done that. But again, it's 2 million lines of code. The architects of the universe that maybe aren't as focused as someone like Linus Torvalds is, who's looking at every commit, maybe they're not. And so the downside of that is they miss stuff like this. They missed it. Because I think that any of their, truthfully, this is my speculation. I don't know for sure. But my speculation is that any of the we'll change this back to age. So we've got 1 month on some of these, which means it was done in that last little set. I suspect that a super senior architect is going to have the same sort of visceral reaction of wanting to, feeling like slightly nauseous when they see this as I do. Because we just know this is a recipe for disaster. This is broken in so many different ways. It's hard to even explain the degree of brokenness. We're all terrified. So what my speculation is that senior level architect never saw this code. They didn't see it because they would have had the same reaction I'm having right now, which is, oh my gosh. But now the trick is it's committed in the main line. It's there. And so that whole code review process, somehow it slipped in. And now those senior architects that are out solving all the universe's problems, they're not looking at Jeff's code. They're busy building the next thing. And this is why you need something like Mentor. And this is what AIs can be really good at, which goes back to when you should use them. Oh, sorry. My answer here for AIs is talking about the language models, how to use them for that. I didn't even list how to use them, how Mentor is used. So we'll add a to be how we should really be using Mentor AI for software development, and we'll just keep it at analyzing all code across all time to find things you've maybe missed and fix them. There we go. We'll leave it at that for now, because the focus of this is not on Mentor. It's how to use all these other things. I'm more just using Mentor as a vehicle to describe these things. So hopefully this all makes sense, and why you would want to use Mentor to do repository-wide analysis. That's at least how I use it, and I think it's super valuable there. And then we'll get into these other reasons, but more on how you shouldn't use it. So you should not, these are my opinions. So agree or disagree. That's totally on you. I'm not the knower of all things. I could be wrong, but the current state of things, and this may change over time, and I hope that it does. I hope that one day I will log into GTT and I'll say, folks, Jeters, today's the day we can start using AI to write production quality code. I savor the day that I can do that. I can't do that today. We're not even remotely close to being able to do that today. We can use it for these other things, like these sketches, these toy examples. I think that it actually suffices for that. And that is actually a massive milestone moving forward from where we were just 10 years ago, just 5 years ago. That's awesome. But let's not go overboard here, right? It's like you invented the automobile and suddenly you're like, we can do everything with this. Let's take it on the ocean. It's not going to go on the ocean, guys. It's not meant for the ocean. Don't drive it in the ocean. But right now you've got all these people that are riding it into the ocean and killing themselves. Stop driving into the ocean. It's not meant for the ocean. I know that the ocean is like 75% of the earth, just like production is maybe 75% of what all the software is. That's not what it's made for. It's meant for the stuff that's land. Very much like these AI systems right now are meant for stuff that are just toys. Maybe one day you'll be able to turn the vehicle into a hybrid vehicle that also can go on the water. And I think that there are cars that do that. Speaking of which, just as an aside, I saw this cool prototype of this vehicle that can do this. I don't want to go into too much detail about the vehicle or the person showing it, but if you Google like a hybrid road and water vehicle, it's yeah, 1,000%. We're hitting the fixed reach the beach. So when you get to the beach, stop and don't go further. Not yet. Switch vehicles. That's the time to switch the vehicle. And at that point, when you get to production, you can switch to Mentor. That will help you with certain things, and you can switch back to other systems. But do not use these other AI systems for that. All right. The next piece is the code that's IP. This is the part that I think Google and Microsoft and all these other people are not telling you. And again, people are not dumb. I don't know why you're not telling people. It feels very disingenuous to not say this. No one in their right mind is going to send, or at least I hope, not send code that is intellectual property to any of these guys' language models. And I don't care if they say that, oh, we're not training on your data. like, even if you're not training on the data, you're at least storing the data temporarily so you can do the analysis, even if you say that we're going to then delete it. But do we really believe that they're going to delete this data? I don't. And I don't think you should either. I think what you should assume is that the moment it leaves your premises, if it's confidential, if it's top secret, if it's trade secret, it's no longer any of those things. All those things you've lost. So if you want to maintain that hyper secret stuff, don't send it over the wire. And most of the code that's out there that I know of that's worth protecting is code that is in this space. Almost all the tech companies that I'm aware of have code that is their own intellectual property. And they're not sending it over the wire because they know that now Microsoft has it, or Google has it, or Amazon. And this is, it's your stuff that now someone else has. And again, I'm not even assuming that these guys are bad actors. Let's assume they're all good actors. Let's assume everything they do is totally trustworthy and is super friendly. Here's the kicker. These guys can get hacked. They have been hacked, I think. At least I've seen. Didn't we have like the biggest security breach that we've ever seen? Something like 11 billion users' credentials were somehow leaked on the internet, and there's this massive health scandal or something, at least going on in the United States. So the point is that places can get hacked, and so even if you have super good actors, a target for a lot of hackers would be big tech companies because they know that they have your data, right? So Google is a good one because they have Android. Apple is another good one because they have iOS. And you can just go through the list. Amazon's really good because they have the Amazon accounts. Meta's really good if you think about Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. You can just go through the list. They're prime targets. So if they're already prime targets for other things, why would you send them your proprietary code, even if you trust them? You shouldn't. You shouldn't. And so don't. That's the second reason. A third reason, if you're in the defense sector, this is probably already a no-op. For those of you, I used to be in the classified sector, and there's not even internet in many of the, at least in the places that I was working in. And so you don't even have the internet to go do things. Yeah, Google just got spanked for $300 million for a fine in California for scraping user data. And they've done some other really not great things that I've seen. I don't want to mention them on this channel because, again, my point is not to beat people up. But if you do a search on, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this that doesn't, I'm just not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to shut up. So, but it's along the lines of what Vare's talking about. So we already know that they're not necessarily altruistic, but even if they were altruistic and perfect, it still is a target. So if you have super secret stuff, maybe don't be sending it to them. And if you don't want to send it to them, that means that you cannot be using these AI systems with your intellectual property code or your classified defense sector code. And then the last one is if you're building anything that you don't want to be sued out of existence for. This one, I think, is also a really interesting one. And this is becoming, I think, a real problem just in general space. So what I mean by this is that we know some of the folks that are building these AI systems, they don't quite understand, or maybe they just don't care about the licensing protection that exists on open source software. So I won't mention names, but there's at least one of the big AI companies that's being sued by many of the these companies that have information on the internet, either in written prose or images or videos, that is their property. that you're not allowed to reproduce in any way. And so these systems have essentially ignored that and just trained on them. And then, surprise, when they run inference, then they generate something that replicates Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, or you name the thing, the article from the New York Times, or Tim Davis's algorithm from GraphBlast, right, which is protected under GPL or something. So the kicker is that many of these systems are now saying that the consumer or the end user is responsible for any of the potential violations of copyright infringement or registration infringement that exists from the original source. So, for example, if you use, and look, I'm just going to say maybe one name just because it's out already, is I think Disney is suing Midjourney. I think probably all of us are aware of this. And if you look at some of the stuff that Midjourney is producing, they're getting stuff that looks a lot like Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or things that are clearly Disney. And so Disney's basically had enough and saying, yeah, this nonsense is going to stop. I'm pretty sure I know how this is going to go. And I don't think that Disney is going to be losing this one, because we can look at it and we can, with the plain eye, just say, yeah, that's like their stuff, guys. You are violating this. And how you're doing it is sort of irrelevant. What matters is you're doing it. So even if Midjourney is saying, well, it wasn't our intention to do that, I get it. I'm not saying you guys are bad guys. I'm just saying that the outcome is that you produce stuff that looks like it's infringing on their trademarks, their copyrights, their intellectual property, and you can't do that. And so you need to now stop your system from doing this. What this ultimately means, I think, is it raises a lot of questions, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're training on data that they shouldn't have. The kicker, though, is that many of these companies that are using AI systems for software are companies. They're not individual consumers. They're developers that work at places like Meta or ClickHouse or wherever. And so then you don't go after the individual developer, Joe Smith or something like that. And you don't necessarily go after GitHub Copilot, although you could. Instead, you go after ClickHouse. And so now ClickHouse is being sued for using code that is proprietary because they used an AI that generated this code that shouldn't have been trained on and was produced by these AI systems. And now they're sued out of existence. Now, you may think that this is sort of like pretend. It's not. It's not pretend. And this type of stuff is happening as we speak. You're probably well aware of like the Midjourney and Disney example, but there are many others that are going on, especially in the world of using AI systems that are generating code that is proprietary code that they never should have been trained on to begin with, specifically code that is like GPL protected code in open source, or other things that it's very clear it's proprietary and they never should have trained on that. I'm going to quickly look at what Vera's saying here. There's probably the other side of that coin where the AI company sues you for using their generated stuff. I'm seeing this scenario in the AI music sphere. Oh, that's interesting. Vera, can you share a little bit more on what you mean here? I'm trying to understand. So is it the AI company that it's like you're using their stuff to generate things, and then you use the generated stuff, and then they say, no, that's ours. You can't use that. That is really interesting and strange. Like if you had a music label or something that used a music generating AI system, and then it produced maybe a music album or something, and then tried to copyright that, and then the AI company, like I don't even know. Just to be clear, a little bit of background on this. So I'm not a lawyer. I have no Juris Doctorate, and so I can't give any kind of legal advice, and I would not give open legal advice even if I had a JD. It is generally like a really bad thing to do. What I can tell you though is, oh, so yes, like Suni, they have a copy on it exactly. Okay, cool, yeah. So right, so they're saying yes that it creates the music, and you can use the music for entertainment or something. But if you try to then copyright the music, then they're kind of like, well, you can't copyright it because we produced it. So yeah, that's really interesting. I don't even know what that one looks like. It'll be curious. I want to share that back when I was at Intel, we were doing this way before this was cool, right? And one of the things that we were building in our machine programming system, this is like the MISM system, machine inferred code semantics or something. And there was a large tech company that was very interested in MISM. And so we're about ready to release it for them to explore. But I was working with Intel Labs General Counsel, which is basically like the senior most attorney that gives you guidance on how to do things at like the corporate level. And in my discussions with this individual, what we found, and again, this is back in 2020, let's say 2020. So we're 5 years in the future now. But in 2020, what we were able to see is there appeared to be no legislation on the use of open source code for training data. And the MISM system did not do code gen. I've built many code gen systems as early as like 2016 and stuff, but this was just a semantic similarity system. So it didn't generate any code. And we discussed this and they're like, okay, we're good then. So anything that you trained on, you don't have to worry about producing it and then using it as software. But they were like, just to be on the safe side, let's make sure that we scrub all of the training data so it's only mining from licenses that are non-GPL, GNU public license. So anything that's GPL, LGPL, GPL2, any of that stuff, you just get that out of there. And part of the reason is even if it is legal in the sense for MISM, because it's not producing code and it's only training on code as data. And again, I'm not trying to argue that it is. I'm just trying to say if it is okay to use that in that capacity, we still don't want to use it because we just want to get in front of it. We know that this is a potential can of worms and it's like a legislation nightmare. And so we just don't want to deal with the issue. And there's ways to train these systems. So you're using open source. I mean, there is a lot of GPL code that's out there. I'll be honest. And so it's not super easy to train on things that are just MIT, Apache, Berkeley, and all of these other licenses that are far more permissive. It does take some effort. Hopefully that will change. I think that GPL was sort of the main vehicle for a while, and then people realized, well, it's a bit restrictive, plus it contaminates. And by the contamination, I mean is that once you use GPL, then you have an obligation, at least as I understand it perfectly, an obligation to then promote the fixes and changes that you make to that GPL code, to the original source. And if you're using it in a commercial capacity, then you have to have some sort of commercial agreement, license, this kind of thing. So it's a contamination type of thing. I'm not trying to state an opinion whether I like it or dislike it. I'm just trying to let you know that when you start using GPL-based code, it can have consequences for the larger scale systems. Where if you use code that is licensed through MIT, Berkeley, or Apache, as I understand it, those tend to be far more permissive and don't necessarily come with the whole contamination part. Is that now you're sort of married to this thing for forever. Anyway, so even in that case, 5 years ago, we scrubbed all the GPL stuff from it because we were worried that legislation would move forward in this capacity and it would ultimately bite us. And that's what I think we're seeing today, is that now we are seeing that people are coming out and saying, you can't do this, that even if you are just training on the code, eventually when you're doing code gen and now that is generating code and that is a replica of the original system, because keep in mind, AI systems are not magical creatures that just manifest things magically like unicorns. They're just scientific models based on mathematical principles in statistics, and they produce things that are based on their training data. That's it. There's nothing magical about this. It doesn't like incept its own opinions about what ice cream tastes like. No matter what Sam Altman and the worshiping of LLM people tell you, any of the hardcore scientists will tell you it's just science. And it is just science. It's like, it's not alive. And the reason why you can tell it's not alive is when you power the machine off and then you restart it, it works again. If it were alive, you would have killed it when you powered it off. Now it's dead. And then when you power it back on, it's now not going to be resurrected, because the best I know, living creatures can't be brought back to life, at least not in the reality that I live in, not in this universe. At least we haven't reached the scientific advances to do that yet. So why would we be able to do it for some other entity? Like, it's not alive. And I know this probably sounds a little crazy, like, wow, Goju's really going off the rails here. He's talking about whether AIs are alive or not. I'm talking about it because people keep talking about how they're like sentient and like they're conscious and all this other mumbo jumbo. It's not. It's a program, guys. It's just a program. Right? And it's cool. I like that it's a program that does cool stuff. It's like my video games. I love video games, and I fight against AIs in the video games, either that I've created or other people created, and it feels real. But I know it's not. I know that I can be like, all right, well, I'm out. I'm just going to power this off, and you'll be back tomorrow. And so similarly, the same thing here is that the AI is not going to magically invent some answer that it's incepted. The answers it will produce will be based on all the data that it's trained on. And so all the data that it's trained on is the data that you trained it on that potentially came from open source and was protected from things like GPL. So if you trained it on GPL stuff and then it produces code that looks a lot like the GPL that it was trained on, and then people use that code in real life, now they are in, best I can tell, license violation of the original GPL. And those GPL people are coming after the companies that are doing this. So goes back to my point, is that if you do not want to be sued out of existence, you want to build something that that's going to be real and not going to be sued out of existence for, don't use AI systems for that. No matter what Google, Microsoft, or whatever is telling you, don't do that. Do it yourself. Now, and yes, here's what I'm saying. If you are doing that, stop. And if you're still doing it, I'm asking you, please stop. And mostly I'm doing this to try to help you. I personally don't care. You do you. If you want to get sued out of existence and you think this isn't real, just listen to what Vera's saying about even the AI folks are suing their own customers for use. Like, just don't do it, right? Like, just understand that that's not what it's used for, and you can use it for other stuff. So what do I think you can use it for? Here are some of the ways that I think you can really use it for that have real value. And this is actually how I use them. Truthfully, this is how I'm using the coding assistants, and I'm using them all the time. I just don't use them in these ways that we discussed. Okay, so the first thing that I do is I have them teach me things about software development, design, and architecture. What do I mean by that? Well, software development is they help me learn programming language syntax. So generally, I understand the higher order concepts of most programming languages. So I understand loops, I understand classes, I understand inheritance, I understand generic programming, I understand dynamic type binding, all the buzzwords and yada yada, all the stuff that you guys know. Yeah, I know those too. What I don't know is the exact syntax to write Lambda functions in C++. Even though I've written Lambda functions in C++, I got to tell you, still the syntax is like, I still feel like it is the language that I love. I do love this language. But for the love of all that is holy, did it really have to look that bad? It was like open paren, equal, close paren, wackiness. Like, I realized you needed to come up with something unique that's not used anywhere else. I get that. And you've done that. But like, I kind of feel like there's something else that's easier than just that. That, I don't know, maybe feels like it's actually an anonymous function. Like, for example, what if it was something like, I'm literally just joking around here, but what if it was something like this? What if it was like this? That's pretty weird. But think about it like this. This kind of looks like an A. Or maybe it's like this, right? Is this like this? And the reason why I think this is kind of cool is that this looks like an A, and then I think anonymous. I think lambda, right? Whereas I don't know that when I type this, I think, sorry, I'm even getting this wrong. Is it like this? Like, I still don't even know. It's like some wacky whatever thing. We'll have to, all right, let's look it up. Syntax for lambda functions, C++. All right, here we go. Oh yeah, okay. It's this thing. Look, I was right about this thing though, about this. So, but the parens probably come in for it being a function. I guess that kind of makes sense. Okay, so it's more like this, and I guess we still have the parens. So okay, I don't know. You guys decide. I'm just being a little wacky here. But I think of this thing, this is, I guess, the capture clause. So I learned something new. I more was just copy pasting this before. Okay, that's the capture clause. I don't know that this implies lambda functions to me, or not. Lambda and anonymous functions, in my mind, they're interchangeable. They're like the same thing. So let's actually look this up. Are anonymous and lambda, yes. Okay, cool. So the AI sort of agrees with me. This is why I use these words interchangeably, is I'm trying to sound as easy to understand as possible. And I think lambda scares people a little bit. So I'll tend to use the word anonymous, because anonymous is a word that like a lot of us use, I think. Like, this person's anonymous, that person's anonymous. Whereas I don't know many people in natural conversation are like, hey, how's your lambda? So that's why I call them anonymous functions more. But in mathematical, if I'm hanging out at the university, I'm calling them lambda functions. Anyway, now you have a little insight into how my mind works. So I think that this looks a lot more like an A than this does. And that's why I think this is a better choice. So maybe what I'll do is I'll find a way to create a macro. I'll start to, like, if this were Lua, I'm pretty sure I could pull this off. I could rewrite this. I could redefine this as this, and then I'd have these anonymous functions. And like, think about how cool that would be, right? All throughout the code, it'd be like, oh, dude, Goju's on the big A has arrived. Like, doesn't this already inspire you rather than like this? I mean, I don't know. I think so. Agree with me, disagree with me. I think about it a little. Let it roll around in your head. I think you might get there. Anyway, okay. So aside from teaching, the software syntax, I think can also be really used for things like design and architecture. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have things like software development patterns, like let's say you have the visitor pattern. Let's say the visitor software design pattern. Okay, cool. So here's the visitor pattern, and it's going to talk about stuff. It's going to show us some pictures and all this thing and blah, blah. Cool. So we have these pictures. What does it look like in code, guys? I know what it looks like in code, but do you? I know what it looks like. Oh, so here we go. Now we have what it looks like in code. Okay. So use the AIs to do this. Be like, oh, I hear this visitor pattern thing is cool. Show me an example with this. Show me a compelling example on how to do visitor. And then it writes the code for you. And then you say, okay, now in this context, how would you do visitor? And then it shows you. And then you don't have to take any of that code. It's just helping you learn. And it's interactive. And we know from studies that one of the best ways to learn is through interaction. It's far more like if you look at the psychological studies, at least the ones that I've read, people tend to be notably more impressionable, or they have significantly more ability to retain information when they're taught the information in an interactive environment, like a video game, right? Rather than being monologued. So what is Wikipedia doing? Wikipedia, while it's probably all factually correct, it's monologuing at us. What are we doing right now in this stream? Dialogue. This is actually why I prefer teaching this way and doing streams to not doing streams. Is the dialogue I find, for me personally, far more entertaining. I'm just kind of bored if it's just the sound of my own voice. And so similarly, you can use the AIs this way. Is you can use them for not just learning the syntax, right? Is that they can do the sketches on how to design something, like how to learn these design patterns or what a certain architecture looks like. And you can be like, well, I know it looks like this in a picture, but what does it look like if it actually is code? Well, now you know. And I'm not saying use that code for production. Don't do that. But learn from that as a proxy to teach you the concept. So this is an embodiment of a higher order concept. You now understand that embodiment. And now because that you understand that embodiment, you can up-level it to understand the higher order abstract concept. And now you know stuff. And now you build your own stuff. You build the thing that is relevant to what it is you're building, not the nonsense that like the AI has built, which is probably throwaway code anyway. Okay, so that is like the second way. I strongly recommend them for syntax. Syntax is like for example, I coded a few things in JavaScript a couple summers ago, and I was married to a few different AI tools. I think I started using like Perplexity, and then I graduated to actual interactive AI systems. It wasn't Cursor because Cursor didn't exist at that point, but I was like going through this, and all it was doing was throwaway code, but it was helping me learn the syntax for JavaScript. Because I'll be honest, like JavaScript constantly throws me for a loop. For example, here's one that JavaScript throws me for that I still don't understand this. The let and var keywords in JavaScript are both used to declare variables, but they differ primarily in their scope and hoisting behavior. Now, the kicker, I think, that is probably maybe the most confusing for me is when I declare a variable, like in almost all languages that are not JavaScript, I'll use something like that it's a variable. I'll say like this is a variable, and it can be indicated by something that indicates it's a variable, and then it's a variable. But in JavaScript, it seems that one of the better ways to do this is to use this let thing. And I can go, yeah, right, here we go. See, look at this. Again, I don't want to go into the details of this because I want to stay focused on this other thing, but here's what the AI says. Let provides more predictable and safer variable declarations due to its block scoping and stricter hoisting behavior. That's cool. That's awesome. I love that. Why is it not called var? The whole world outside of JavaScript calls this kind of like vars. That's what they're known as. Like these things here, this A and this B and Y, these are variables. Var is short for variable. I don't know what this let thing is. That feels like this is a mathematical thing. Like let X equal to whatever. And I may use that for like formal mathematics, but when I'm writing code, I have variables. And usually when I see a keyword like var, it means I'm creating a variable. And in JavaScript, somehow it does not do this. Like here, if you create this var X, then somehow you can access this X outside of the scope. But if you have this let, and then you try to use it here, it's not like, I'm down with that. But why is that not called var? So the whole world is calling this thing that you eat that's between like these two pieces of bread a sandwich, and you're calling it purple. Why did you just not call it sandwich, bro? Why are you like, there's a video we have that we just did, and it's called Not Being the Architect of Your Own Demise. Yo, JavaScript, you're architecting your own demise. I don't know who thought that let would be the right word for creating variables rather than var, but you guys kind of got it wrong. And I don't think I'm the only one that's very confused about this, because I think the whole world is like, for example, if you decided not to call this an if and instead you called it spaghetti, I think people would be really confused. They're like, I'm trying to create an if statement, Bob. How do you do this? Oh, you mean spaghetti? No, I mean, I'm trying to create an if statement. Oh, yeah. No, I understand that. It's in JavaScript, it's spaghetti. Just type spaghetti and you're good. Why though? Why is it not called an if? Oh, it's just a JavaScript thing. WTF. WTAF. JavaScript. I don't think you got this right. This is the kind of stuff that AI is super useful for. Because in a million years, I'm not going to intuit this nonsense. I'm not going to know that they decided to just do this weird thing. I'm also not going to know what the syntax is for these Lambda functions. And so the AIs are really good at this, and so they can tell you. Use them for that. All right, last point. I also think that AIs are really, really good at helping us explore problems and forcing us to think outside of our normal paths of thinking. This is, I talk about this in some of my former talks. I think when I was at Intel, there's like a big like world event or something. I talked about this where I was talking about how humans tend to run with human bias. And what human bias does is it's this analogy of you're trying to go from the West Coast to the East Coast. So, for example, I'm going to New York for some event in a couple months, and immediately I'm like, I'm going to fly there. I'm going to fly straight to LaGuardia or wherever, and I'll leave SFO. If I use an AI may actually do a better job for this because it doesn't have the human bias. An AI may say, look, Goju, you think going from SFO to LaGuardia is the best option, but the truth is it's not. First of all, you should fly out of SJC because it's closer to where you live. So you're going to save yourself commuting time. Second, you're not going to fly straight to LaGuardia. You're going to make a pit stop at this place, and this place. Why are you going to do that? Because there's people that you need to meet that you've forgotten about that are super important, and you're already heading that direction. So just make a pit stop here for one day, make a pit stop here for one day, hang out with these people. You'll still get to LaGuardia and you'll solve 15 problems in one fell swoop. This is where I think AIs can be super useful for software development, and it has nothing to do with coding. It has to do with thinking. Is that the AIs, you can walk through and say, okay, I'm going to build this file parser. Tell me, AI, about all of the error cases that I should handle that are outside of the common path. Let's actually try this. Let's just see what it does, okay? Because I suspect we can think about these, but this is what I mean about thinking outside cases, helping us think outside cases outside the box. All right, so let's try this. Tell me all the error conditions that can arise by when programming a file parser. For example, file not found. I'll give it one example. Let's see what it does. And the truth is, I know that there are many, and it knows that there are many too. Look at this. This now has helped us figure out all the, or many of the cases of the things we need to deal with. And it's not used for code at all. Okay, so we go back to these silly guys talking about how this thing, what are they even talking about? Anybody that's written code knows when you're building these real big systems, this is a tiny, tiny portion of what you're actually doing. A large portion of what you're doing is this. You're thinking. You're, okay, I got to do this thing. All right, I got to figure out how to do all this stuff. The AIs can help you with that. They can walk through and be like, okay, cool. So Goju, you've got these access errors. You've got these format problem errors. You've got stream errors. You've got other, oh my gosh, like, I don't know that this is exhaustive, but this is great. This is fantastic. And then on top of that, let me walk you through why this is also really good. One, if you use it this way, I guarantee you, you are not going to be sued out of existence for using the AI this way. Second thing is that when you use it this way, you can use it for this, for writing production quality code. Why? Because you're writing the production quality code. The system is just helping you with the software design. It's just helping you walk through the various cases that's telling you like the stuff that you probably forgot about. Like, let's ask another thing. What are some of the most common ways to build in redundancy for databases? I know a couple, but let's see what it has to say. There are multiple ways to do this. There we go. So we're trying to figure out how to build a redundant database system. We don't know how to do this. It's just shared a whole bunch of ideas. This can be super helpful. This is all related to software development. This is all related to design and design patterns and all this stuff. Like, yes, use it this way. Stop thinking that software development is just this piece. It's not. This is such a simplistic, naive view of the world. Software development is much larger than the code that actually is used for the software. There's so many external jobs and activities that we do to get to that code. And so why are you using a soft science stochastic thing to do this thing that is hard science and that we're also really good at doing or doing wrong, and they're equally as bad or worse about doing right? Instead, use it on these things where we're not necessarily super great. Like, off the top of my head, I can think immediately about one or two ways to do redundancy for databases, but it's come up with significantly more details, and I love it. Like, it's got RAID in here. It's got automatic failover, geo redundancy. Like, this is some next level awesome stuff. This is software development, right? Like, this is this whole idea of understanding what it is you're doing. It has nothing, only, what is it? 3% of software development is actually writing code. Massive misconception on where we're actually spending our time in software development. And stunning to me that someone as seasoned as this guy, that should potentially know the difference, that a lot of software development has nothing to do with this piece, is trying to argue that the state of the universe, which is producing really low quality, low fidelity stuff with these AI systems, is bleeding into the hype AI marketing machine and potentially losing a lot of trust because of it. And I'm not trying to not foster goodwill. I really do hope Google sets itself on the right path, learns to control the hype. I know that they were feeling a little bit of panic because that other company was beating them to the punchline, but supposedly the story has changed, at least to some degree. And so maybe they can chill out a little bit now. So Sundar and all you Googlers, you guys are doing some pretty good work. You're not perfect. Nobody is. But stop with this. Just stop. You're hurting yourself, and you're making us lose faith in you. And we don't necessarily want to lose faith in you. But Apple's not doing this, right? I'm one of those rare people. I own an iPhone and I own an Android phone simultaneously. I'll be honest, mostly it's because the Apple Watch, at least the most recent version, is like manna from heaven for me. Like, there's nothing in the world that comes close to the Apple Watch in my mind. And I've used like the Garmin smartwatch for a long time. It's just, for my purposes, the Apple Watch is amazing. And Apple, for as much as I hate them, they pulled a quick one on us, forcing us to own an iPhone so we can have the Apple Watch. Okay. Well played, Apple. I've got my eye on you. There's going to be some payback, but well played. You got me. That being said, I'm following both of these Titan companies, and I don't see Apple making egregious missteps like this. I'm not saying that Apple has got it all figured out. Supposedly, they're really far behind in the AI race, but sometimes being behind actually puts you in front. Because I think some of the stuff that Google's doing in trying to be part of that race is actually setting them back. Like, there's a time sometimes where you should be like, I'm going to just sit this one out a little bit. I don't quite know enough. I need to learn a little bit more. You guys go ahead. And then when I figure it out, I'll catch up. And whether or not that's what Apple has done, I don't see Apple saying ridiculously stupid things like this. And I almost guarantee you that Sundar will be walking this back, very much like many of the folks that were saying all AI systems are going to replace. There will no longer be software engineers. And now the majority of them are saying, oh, no, that's not true. There'll always be software engineers. My bad. I shouldn't have said that. Just don't say the stupid thing to begin with. Like, you kind of already know that you're BSing. Like, you know, in your heart of hearts, like, yeah, are you sure, marketing team? This feels like a little egregious. This is not really the truth. Should we maybe not say this? And then they're like, well, yeah, you're the boss. This is kind of inflated. This isn't really the state of the universe. And then you say, yeah, I'm not going to say that. And then you don't say it. And then you don't have a random YouTuber who knows nothing like me giving a 2-hour oration on why this is supremely stupid to say. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm mostly done for now. The last comment that I want to read, and maybe we're going to adjourn for the time being. This, by the way, was super fun. We'll look at what Vera has to say. AI is like having a replicator, but it's a mental one. Yeah, it's incredible to toss completely unrelated ingredients at it, and it can seamlessly integrate them. There's nothing like it. I totally agree. Absolutely. I use it for some wacky things. Like, one of the other things that I use it for, while we're all friends here, is I use it to give me movie recommendations. So I'm a huge movie buff. And while I'm working, I often like to have stuff playing in the background. Like, in my studio, I have 5 different screens, but I have a big one in the back. My home studio, I have the big screen in the back, and then at the office, I have a big screen in the back. And usually it's playing like the white noise kind of thing, but sometimes it'll be playing random stuff that I found that I'm kind of not paying attention to, and I'll pay attention. I don't know, it just makes it feel more chill. It actually like makes me able to work longer, is because it kind of feels like I'm playing a little bit, even though I'm working. And so what I have done by doing this for so long is I've exhausted a lot of my movie collection. So I've seen a lot of the stuff that I like and that I would like. So I use AI now to tell me about stuff, and I found incredible things. Speaking of which, there's 2 shows that I found recently that I just want to mention that you may or may not like. If you seem to be wired like me, where you like things like Inception and Tenet, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of some, like I'm a huge fan of Dark City. That's one of my favorite all-time sci-fi shows. I really like things that are related to time bending. So shows like Primer or Looper or various stuff. I'm a big fan of Westerns. I mean, almost anything that's like not a rom-com or super drama, I'm probably going to be a big fan of. But really, I'm drawn to things that are more sci-fi, supernatural-ish. So there's 2 shows that I started dabbling in, and I'm absolutely loving them. The precursor show to this is The Sandman. If you haven't seen Sandman, and it kept popping up on Netflix for me, and again, if this isn't a show for you, no worries. We all have different taste. But if you seem to like sort of the supernatural, crazy, weird stuff that's pretty cerebral, so I like stuff that is hyper intelligent, but it's nuanced. I don't like this whole Superman, good guy, bad guy. Like there's just a bunch of guys. And I really like it when the good guys end up being the bad guys and the bad guys are actually the good guys, or they do like a triple flip, or everybody's just a guy and they all have their own agenda, because it feels real. Like, for example, I don't think Sundar Pichai is a bad guy. I think he's probably thinks he's doing as good of a job as he can. And I think he's probably doing a really good job. I just don't think that this is good. I think that he made a misstep here, but I don't think that this is an overall characterization of who he is as a person. I just think like he allowed the marketing team to have him say something that's dumb, and he shouldn't have done that. And I speak from experience because I've had the marketing team convince me to say things that are dumb, and then I regret them, and nobody blames the marketing team. They blame the CEO, or they blame the big boss, or whatever. So it's just like a learning thing. Anyway, those are sort of my type of shows. The Sandman is, in my view, quite good. I think the second and potentially final season is coming out in just a few days. Along those lines, there's a sequel that's coming up. I think it's called Old Guard. And to give this some background, by the way, we've totally switched out of technology and AI. Now we're going into movie discussion. And I'm going to, you know what? Actually, I want to talk about this movie thing a little bit more, but I really need a short bio break. So I'm going to pause this for just a moment so I can do that. And then I'm going to come back. So you guys just chill for a second. Give me a moment. I'll be back in 2 minutes. I'll actually leave something in the chat. And then we'll talk about movies, and then we'll call it a night. Okay, so be back in 2 minutes, refreshing the Coke Zero. By the way, yes, I'm still drinking my Coke Zero, but I just do it in this because I can use ice, and so I get more water. For those of you who are concerned that I'm getting dehydrated, but it's just this stuff that's going into this stuff. So I'm still addicted to my Coke Zero, but it has slightly more hydration, I guess, to it. All right. I will be back in 2 minutes. Let's see if the dog's going to join us. Merle, you want to come up here? Merle, come on, buddy. Come on, up here. Come on, buddy. We're going to talk about movies for a second. There we go. All right. We got the doggy. Hey, buddy. By the way, this dog is crazy. He like, sorry, what's the most efficient version of Coca-Cola? Coke. Where are you going? He's out of here. No, he's not out of here. Oh, he just didn't want to be held. He just wants to sit at my feet now. He's rooting. Do you guys know this dog rooting thing? So the rooting thing, as I understand it, is like it's from their wolves ancestry, their genes, where in the wild they dig themselves in, right? Because they want to hide their scent. Yeah, you can tell he's rooting because he keeps bumping the monitor. Okay. I'm tempted to point the camera on him just so you can. Yeah, that's all Merle. He's walking in a circle now. He's scratching. It's quite hilarious. All right, so that's what he's doing. Okay, let's just talk movies for just a second. All right, I'm a huge movie buff. I love music. I love good, slow burn, deeply cerebral things. And I don't mean like pretentious cerebral, where like if they're snarky and they're sarcastic and they're just like doing this back and forth vocabulary battle, I don't care. I care about the stuff that's like, it's nuanced, it's slow, and they can say a single sentence and you're sort of like, wait, what? And everybody pauses. And everybody thinks, wait, what just happened? And it's not even something that's necessarily this massive event. It's more this disruptive comment that was unanticipated. It's like surprising. Those are sort of my shows. So an example of that is, what is this show? It's this nurse. Sorry, no, she's a nun. It's on Peacock, and it's Nun. Yeah, it's Mrs. Davis. That's what it is. Mrs. Davis, I think, is a show that is like sort of my kind of show. But by the way, this is not for everybody. If you have Davis RT, let's see, what is, yeah, so Rotten Tomatoes given it 92% or so, it seems. 92%, 81 from audience. That's cool. If you are hyper religious, and you're like Christian, you're probably not going to love this. So maybe it's not for you. But if you're not, I think that you might enjoy it. Anyway, so those are sort of like my kind of shows. And I use the AI. Actually, Taylor has seen me use the AI to give me a list of sort of these shows that are unusual that I don't know about, so I can have stuff in the background. One of the things I'm watching, by the way, in the background now is the original remastered Star Trek. And we're talking Captain Kirk Star Trek. I've never seen it. I've only seen like spots here and there. These are not the shows on Netflix, by the way. But I have to tell you, I am very surprised at how good some of these episodes are. Like, and I'm not talking, I mean, yes, the action is like from the 70s or whatever, and it's sort of got the Batman pow poo whatever, and it's silly and it's strange and it's funny. That's not what I'm talking about. And I realize the special effects are like the Enterprise is floating on a string, and it's terribly bad. I get all that. And it's actually interesting because they remastered some of that, and with some of the remastered shots, you're looking at it, or at least I am, saying, this looks incredible. Like, I was looking at some of the stuff saying, there's no way they could have done this in the 60s. And then I realized, oh, they like redid these shots. Anyway, what I'm talking about with Star Trek is some of the stories and the way that they, even the dialogue and the way that they're handling some of these situations are really advanced and super nuanced. I mean, I don't know if it's just me watching it now, but for those of you that are sort of like aware of all the stuff that's going on in the world with Me Too and other stuff, and no comments about that, at least I'm not going to make any, but if you watch some of these Star Trek episodes, it's wild how some of this stuff is like profoundly relevant to what's going on today. And some of it may even seem supremely wise compared to what's going on today. I mean, I'll leave it at that. I maybe in a couple months, after some of you maybe have had time to watch some of the original Star Trek, we'll talk about some of the episodes. But there's a couple in there that really got my mind working in terms of thinking, man, they're just breaching some really sensitive topics in a way that is like playful, but it's also very informative. I realize that people that are maybe like hypersensitive and kind of want to have issue with everything are not going to love that. But I don't think those people are going to love GTT anyway, because I say some kind of borderline things that are very nuanced that likely are not going to sit well with them. So they probably are not going to watch this anyway, this show. So they're probably not going to hear this advice or start watching Star Trek and become offended. They likely are already far more offended by me and the things that I've said, and they've banned my existence. So for those of you that are not in that group, check out the original Star Trek if you get a chance and share what you think. I'm only on season 1 and I'm just a couple episodes in, and mostly it's playing in the background, but it's good stuff. At least that's my take. Now, the 3 shows on Netflix that I wanted to share, and there's actually 4 now since Old Guard showed up, is the first is Sandman. Then Sandman season 2 is coming in. And Sandman is, at least in my mind, it's one of those hidden gems. Netflix was asking me to watch Sandman for, I don't know, years. And I just saw the cover and thought, this just looks like something I'm not going to like. It just felt like it was like a vampire brooding thing. And I've seen or heard of the Twilight stuff. No offense to the star from Twilight. I actually love that guy. But like the Twilight stuff is not for me. I'm not a teeny bopper. That's what it felt like the Sandman was. And boy, was I wrong. Sandman is not that at all. It has lots of levels. There's lots of subtext. And it can be hyper cerebral. I haven't watched it in a while, but if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. And then season 2 is coming out soon, like in 2 days or something, which hopefully is great. Along the same lines, there's Old Guard 2, I think it's Old Guard. Yeah, Old Guard 2 that's coming out in just a couple of days. You should also know I am not a huge fan of Charlene Theron, I think is what her name is. Is it Charlene Theron? Sorry, Charlize Theron. I'm not a huge fan of her. And I won't get into the details why. I'm not saying I dislike her. I just am not someone that lines up, like for example, everything Ryan Gosling does, I'll watch. Like I don't care what it is. If Ryan Gosling's in it, I'll watch it. Same way with Emily Blunt. If Emily Blunt's in something, I'll watch it. Just it doesn't even matter. Where Charlize Theron is not one of those people for me. And somehow I got sucked into Old Guard, and I was blown away by how good Old Guard is or was. Now, generally speaking, when I look at Rotten Tomatoes, I don't look at the critic score. I look at the audience score. And the reason why I do that is I generally think that the critics, I don't usually agree with them as much, but I almost always agree with the general public. And so they're maybe 70% of them are +1 on this. I'm in that 70%. I think this is actually surprisingly good. And maybe part of the reason why I was so impressed is I had no idea what it was. It just came on and I was like, sure, whatever this is. And then I was like, wait, what am I watching here? And it turned out to be really good. So that's my second recommendation of things that are out. So you have Sandman, that's out. And yeah, and an Aeon Flux. Yeah, absolutely. And props to like maybe the original or one of the original incarnations of Aeon Flux back in like MTV days, where I think that was sort of like part of the inspiration for the movie. But yeah, I think she did a great job in that. And I think she's actually a really phenomenal actress just in general. I'm not trying to send any shade to Charlize. Okay. Now, on top of that, the two shows that I wanted to share, and the first one is less controversial, so I'll share that first. If you like Sandman, supposedly they say you'll like this Dead Boy Detectives. And I got to be honest, the moment I heard the title, Dead Boy Detective, yeah, the cartoon was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Ver. It was a cartoon. And wow, it's some dark, like really cyberpunky kind of stuff, at least from what I remember. And so if you haven't seen the cartoon, like I think it was MTV, maybe. I don't know. Let's look this up. This is Aeon Flux MTV. Yeah. This was like pretty, it's sort of like heavy metal level of like this heavy metal kind of thing. By the way, if you like any of that stuff, I strongly recommend you check out Gondahar. 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 This. Gondahar. We're really going all over the place. Gondahar. There, I'm telling you, based on what I know about you, if you have not seen Gondahar, probably same with you, T. If both of you guys have not seen Gondahar, I strongly recommend you check it out. It's not perfect, but knowing what you guys like, trust me on this one. Okay. So the first show, Dead Boy Detectives or Dead Boys Detectives or something like Dead Boy Detectives. It's a terrible name. And they even make fun of it themselves, which brings a smile to my face. Supposedly this is a spinoff or it's an addition to like Sandman, I guess, something like this. And I started watching it and then I was like, I just can't do this. This feels like a teeny bopper thing. And no disrespect to teeny bopper. It's just, I'm 50 now. And I tend to like shows that are more like No Country for Old Men. Right. That's like my kind of show. Like I like shows like Tombstone or, what's that other? There's like an HBO Western. I forget the name of it now, but it's along this line. It's just kind of like dark stuff. That's not this sort of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which, by the way, I think was also a pretty good show. But that's kind of like what I mean about sort of the teeny bopper stuff. It's fun, it's cute, but after a while, I think the sarcasm and the sort of snarkiness just kind of erodes away on me. I just kind of like, can you just talk and just say something meaningful rather than just the subtext of if you only knew this, and then I don't know. It's just not for me. Okay, so I was wrong about Dead Boy Detectives. When you watch maybe the first episode, it should become super clear that there's something kind of special going on. If you like these types of things, it goes down some wacky paths that, at least for me, were totally unexpected. I'm captivated. I don't know where it's going to go. I've only seen maybe one episode, but so far I'm actually super impressed. So if you watch Sandman, supposedly they say Dead Boy Detective or something is part of the Sandman collection. I don't know. It's sort of like how they do the Witcher thing. It's like you got the Witcher series and then you got all these spin-off things. And some of the spin-offs are actually better than the main Witcher show. Which, by the way, I love Henry Cavill, but like, boy, did Witcher, I think, miss the mark. For me personally, I wish Witcher was awesome. I wanted Witcher to be incredible, and then it became, I don't know what it became, but it went in a way that I think just turned it into something that's not the masterpiece that like it could have been. And if you want to see what I mean about masterpiece of like things that could or should have been, so Witcher, I think, was set up to be really, really strong just because the general story of The Witcher, at least as I understand it, is a powerful one. It's like Game of Thrones. It's a powerful story. Same way with like Star Wars. Andor. If you haven't seen Andor and you have any kind of remote positive feelings about Star Wars, check out Andor. Do it sort of this way. Watch Andor season 1, Andor season 2, and then watch the I think I started watching that a little bit there, the Hemlock Grove. Then the third one that you should watch is the movie. The movie is last. So watch the first 2 seasons of Andor, then watch the movie. And I started doing this. I watched the first 2 seasons of Andor, and I have to say, I think this is arguably some of the best Star Wars stuff that's existed. I think it's arguably better than the Star Wars: A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi trilogy. And way better than the original whatever Clone Wars, whatever that cartoon character guy was that just kept talking and we all wanted to kind of like wring his neck. That guy. So check that out. Okay, so Dead Boy Detective. I'm giving you all kinds of stuff. The last one I want to share, and I'm saving this for last because it's a little bit controversial, but it's very interesting. I think it's super interesting, and it's cerebral, and it's an enigma, and that is Preacher. The show Preacher. This show. Now, when you first start watching this, based on, at least for me, I started watching this and I didn't know what to expect. And I strongly recommend you don't watch any trailers. Don't read anything about it. If you trust my judgment, if you think I like the stuff that Goju likes, don't watch the trailer. Don't read about it. Just start watching it. And I can almost guarantee you're going to get very confused in a really delightful way. You're going to get this, wait, what is happening here? And if it's anything like me, I started watching it and then, because it was playing in the background, and I was like, hold on, what am I even watching? Because it goes in such a strange direction. and things are happening really fast, and they do not beat you over the head with it at all. They're like, if you don't get it, we're moving on. Sorry. And so I literally had to start this over multiple times and be like, okay, you need to stop working and pay attention to this for like 15 seconds. And so I think now I'm in season 2. And I have to say that at least for season 1, what I think I saw was, like, at least for me, masterpiece. I mean, brilliant at a level that I can't even begin to describe. And it's not for everyone. It can be gory at times. It can be vulgar at times. If you have like sort of a weak, you're like easily made nauseous about seeing stuff that's I don't want to say, let's say somewhat graphic. Not graphic in terms of nudity, but graphic in terms of action and violence. Is there some graphic things you're like, okay, I don't know that I need to see that? If that stuff kind of turns your stomach, this is probably not the show for you. But if you can handle that stuff and you like things that are not going to beat you over the head, but they're going to give you hints about something that's like really quite sophisticated and you have to figure it out, I think you're going to love the show. At least season 1. I haven't seen the other seasons. I hear that the way this kind of concludes is pretty atrocious, which is unfortunate. I still feel like they should redo season 8 of Game of Thrones, just because Game of Thrones, I think, was so brilliant from season 1 to season 7. And then season 8 came, and it's like a great example of what happens when you race to the end. I think they were racing to the end. Who knows why? And they utterly destroyed the legacy of Game of Thrones. At least that's my take. And I'm a huge fan of the show, right? I'm not saying this so I can badmouth it. I want Game of Thrones to be a masterpiece, and I think that it was for the first 7 seasons. And then season 8 and then it happened, and then suddenly all the characters that were super complicated and nuanced and were going through dynamic growth periods and transitions, they all just reverted back to cardboard cutouts, and they did supremely stupid things that didn't even match with their story arc. And you're like, what is this garbage? Why did they do this? They're like, it's infuriating. So anyway, I hear that Preacher kind of does this as it moves into later seasons. I don't know. I haven't gotten there. But for at least season 1, for my take, by the time I got to the end of season 1, I was legitimately like, this is a masterpiece. This season just by itself, if I don't watch any more, this is next level brilliant stuff. They have intrigued me in a way that is super nuanced and in completely unexpected way that I'm totally captivated. And I'm a very hard guy to captivate, as I think many of you probably are as well. All right. I think that's all I got for tonight. This is maybe our longest stream now. We're breaching 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's super cool. I'm going to try to do more of these streams as we move forward. And I'm going to try to continue to talk about these things. I, of course, try very hard to give this like a fair take, you know, not try to beat people up unfairly, but also tell you what I really think about when I think things are hypey kind of nonsense and when I think they should stop. And so hopefully you enjoy that kind of thing. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining tonight. This was a lot of fun for me. And I feel like we all learned stuff. Well, I hope you learned stuff, but even I learned stuff. Like, that's the syntax for our lambda anomalous functions in C++. Although I do think that is a way cooler syntax. And so I'll email I'll email my buddies. I'll email Bjarne and be like, I probably actually do have Bjarne's email address. I mean, I have met and spoken with, I've worked with Bjarne for a while when we're doing transactional memory. I'm sure he doesn't remember me, but he's a cool guy, and I have a lot of respect for all the things that he's done. But yeah, I'm only kidding. I don't know that I'm going to email him this, but maybe one day when we create our ++C language and we do anonymous functions, we're going to do this, and we'll know that its origin point was on Goju Tech Talk on July 1st as not a joke. So thanks, everybody. You guys have a great whatever day it is, and we'll be talking to you next time.